Hello and welcome to today's Q&A session of pianoTV. So we are going to be looking at 4 questions today. I do these once a month. And as always, if you have any questions or things that are bugging you with your piano practice, anything you want to know, just feel free to leave it in the comments below and I might bring them up for next month's Q&A session. So today we are going to look at 2 questions that relate to technique, like scales and arpeggios. We also have something about small hands, and then we're going to talk about whether or not it's important to sight read exclusively, memorize exclusively, etc. So let's get started. So question number 1 from Jill is very short and sweet. Octave chromatic scales. How? So I'm going to assume that you're a fairly advanced piano player if you're asking this question, because chromatic octave scales are not easy. They're not for the faint of heart. So the way I was taught to play them, and I think it's the simplest way, is to use finger 1 and 5 on the white keys and 4 and 1 on the black keys, and then alternate. And then when you get to a spot with 2 white keys in a row, you just do 1, 5, 1, 5. And then the same thing in the left hand. 5, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, etc., etc. I've seen variations of this that use finger 3, but unless you have really large hands, I wouldn't even bother with that. So this works for both ways. So you could do legato. Here, I'll move up the octave so you can see. You could do legato smooth scales and so on, or you could do it like the staccato scales where you play them solid. And either way, that finger altering should work. Now, one thing is it takes a little while to build up the ability to play them without getting super tense after like a minute, because it is such a weird shape at first. So when I first learned how to do staccato scales, I basically practiced in like 1-minute segments throughout my practice. So if I was practicing for an hour, I might try the octave scales like 3 times, just scattered throughout the hour, because any more than that created too much tension in my hands. It turned into a claw. I got sore. So that's something to consider when you're learning how to do octave scales. Question number 2 is from Naya, and she's asking if I could do a video on arpeggios and how best to play them, since she or he, sorry, I guess it is assumed, is playing a Chopin waltz in E minor, and it starts with arpeggios. So we have 2 piano technique related questions to start with. So I just have up here just a regular arpeggio. So for those of you who don't know what an arpeggio is, it's basically just a chord that's played broken style. And they can be 2 octaves, 4 octaves, they can be basically any span. So I'm going to answer this question in 2 ways. So first of all, we're going to look at just like regular standard arpeggios and how you would play them. And then we're also going to take like a really brief look at the specific piece that Naya is referring to, which is it has arpeggios, but they're not exactly like standard. They're a little bit different. So for standard arpeggios, whether it's 2 octaves or 4 octaves or whatever, the challenge is getting hand hops figured out if you want to play it at a fast speed. So if you're playing a C arpeggio and you're doing it at a slow speed, I just do like a thumb under cross, kind of like you would do a scale, right? As a scale, you go 1, 2, 3, thumb rolls under. When you're doing an arpeggio, slowly, you can do the same thing. But there comes a point in time when you're speeding up an arpeggio where that cross under doesn't serve you anymore. Once you start getting it to a certain speed, like, whoa, I haven't played that in a while. You need to learn how to jump your hand. So instead of crossing under, I kind of just like shuffle my hand sideways. It creates a break in the sound, but if you're going really fast, even faster than that, it ends up sounding a little bit more seamless. So at some point in your arpeggio journey, I know this is getting kind of advanced, but I just want to let everyone know that you have to kind of evolve from your cross under, which slows you down, into like a hand hop movement. And the same is true for your left hand. Whereas if you do a crossover, when you're doing it slow, you see how my like whole arm and wrist and elbow kind of move when I do that? I don't know if you can actually see that from the filming vantage point, but it does. So eventually when we speed these up, we have to shuffle our hand over. You can kind of see, I'm trying to do it in slow motion so you can see what I'm doing. The arpeggios in Chopin's waltz require a repetitive finger movement. So I haven't actually ever learned this before. I literally am just trying this right now. But the finger pattern is 2, 1, 2, 5, 2. So 2, 1, 2, 5, 3, 1. And then it kind of does the same thing again. 2, 1, 2. And this time just substituting 4 for 3. And it's so basically it's the same finger pattern over and over as it climbs up the keys. So I would practice this in 2 ways. First of all, it has to be really fast eventually, which is the main challenge. But I would practice playing them really slowly and smoothly, all at the same tempo. And so on. And then once you can do that pretty comfortably at a slow speed, I would micromanage it 1 bar at a time, trying to get it fast. So if I'm just doing the first bar, I just kind of do that over and over until I'm pretty comfortable with that movement. And then I'd also practice bridging it over to the next note. And so on. So I would do a little bit of combination slow and steady practice with the whole part, as well as micromanage bar by bar to practice getting it faster like that. So the third question is from Reski, an adult beginner, talking about how they can't reach an octave and they have really small hands, so they're nervous to take music lessons because of having small hands. Do you think it's possible to reach a high grade with small hands like mine? I know that there's a piano made for smaller hands like mine, but I don't think there are any in my country, and sometimes I want to learn piano properly and get lessons, but my small hands keep haunting me. I like it the way you said that. So let's take a look at this. So first of all, even more important than hand size is your fingers' flexibility. So some people have natural hand shapes that are very closed. The hands kind of don't spread very far. They kind of look like that. While other people's hands tend to sprawl open more easily. So if you have small fingers, you can work on developing a good spread, like a hand spread, between your first finger and your fifth finger. So if you notice, hopefully you can see at this angle, mine can spread about 180 degrees, which in my hands are really not that big. I have like incredibly average woman hands. They're definitely not capable of like 9ths and 10ths on a regular day. But anyway, this hand span is what enables me to reach octaves as opposed to having large fingers. So if your hand span is really good, but you still can't, so you can like spread out your fingers really wide, but you can't reach an octave, what do you do? Well, there's a few things you can do. So for example, if I'm learning like a Liszt or a Chopin piece, and those guys had huge hands, right? So they compose pieces with tenths all over the place. And it can be really challenging to do those. Because most people can reach an octave, but very few people can reach a 10th, right? So the way around that is, say your notes are C and E. Is there a way you could incorporate the E in your right hand, or whatever hand it's in? Can you play the 2 notes detached, kind of like a guitar would strum a chord in slow motion? Like, can you delete the note? These are questions that you can figure out for yourself when you're learning a piece, or if you have a teacher. They're happy to help out with those kinds of things. There's lots of repertoire too that doesn't require tenths and huge stretches. Even there's pieces that don't have octaves. For like, little kids when they're getting really, really advanced, there's still music for them too, right, before their hands have grown. Even some Chopin pieces. And if you had a teacher help you figure that out, I think that would be a really great idea. Question number 4 is from Vince. When I was learning piano, I relied really heavily on my sight reading ability. He loved sight reading, but that impaired his ability to memorize a piece. He goes on to say, my mentality was, why memorize when I could just sight read? Today I find that without my sheet music, I'm totally lost. There are songs that I could have memorized because of doing concert and such, but other than that, I rely on having my sheet music. Is that a bad thing? So I've seen both sides of this coin in my studio. I've had students who could sight read really, really well, but the second they started to try to memorize something, they just had a really, really hard time. Like, it was like the music that they're reading didn't really impress on their memory, and they really needed that sheet in front of them. And I've also had students who memorize so fast because their reading is not very good, so they memorize things instantly in order to be able to play piano, and if you put up a sheet in front of them, they're like, nah. So what I think with either one of these tendencies is it's best to find a middle ground, because each one points to a lack. So with the person who can sight read, can't memorize, you're missing out on this whole other aspect of musical development when you're not memorizing pieces. It's really, really helpful to be able to memorize with ease, and it really adds to the learning experience. Conversely, if you're a memorizer and you're not very good at sight reading, then your learning is going to be lopsided as well, because you're not going to be able to learn as much as quickly, because the better reader you are, the more music you can get through and digest. And it's just, both approaches are entirely lopsided. So, speaking from my own personal experience, I am a memorizer. I was a horrible sight reader when I was younger, and it really, really crippled me in my ability to play, because as soon as I started getting higher level music, like grade 8, grade 9 level music, grade 10 even, I just floundered because I struggled so hard to read the notes, and I knew that that was a problem. So for the last decade, I've been developing my ability to sight read. And now that I'm becoming a better sight reader, I'm not great, but I'm like infinitely better than I was 10 years ago. I can learn pieces quicker. And even though I still kind of memorize as I go, it's just my natural tendency, I can read competently, and it just lets me learn those pieces easier. It also doesn't screw me up when I have the sheet in front of me anymore. So anyway, the long answer to this question, that was the long answer. So the short answer to this question is that if you're finding yourself really imbalanced in one way or the other, then do your best to try to develop the other ability too, so that you're not too out of balance. And that is all for today's Q&A. Hopefully you found it useful. You found some answers to questions that maybe you didn't know you had, or it gave you some ideas for things to work on down the road. And again, I mentioned this at the beginning, but feel free to leave your own questions below, and maybe we'll talk about them next month. Thank you for everyone who helps make these videos possible, for all of you who watch and like and give this give these videos thumbs up, and you subscribe and all that's really good. I really appreciate it. Catch you in the next video. If you put up a sheet in front of them, they're like, nah.